Good morning to you, Jonathan.
Good morning.
Okay, you're thrust into the limelight as a 17-year-old on Britain's Got Talent. How old do you think you were when you realised you had that voice?
On Britain's Got Talent in 2012, a 17-year-old kid stunned the world. The charm was in Jonathan Antoine's voice. However, he hid a secret for 28 years that lay beneath his fame. He was only 4 years old when the bullying began. Children flung snacks at him. Teachers discovered him sobbing by himself. The diagnosis that altered everything then came. Jonathan's situation went beyond his weight or timidity. It was something more profound, something that clarified why he had always felt so odd. His eventual revelation of the truth will shatter your heart. On January 13, 1995, Jonathan Antoine was born in Shigwell, Essex. From the outside, it appeared to be a peaceful, affluent area to grow up. However, things were different inside his realm. Jonathan displayed unusual musical ability from a young age. He possessed perfect pitch by the age of 6, which is something that only roughly 1 in 10,000 people possess. Despite the rarity of his gift, nobody took any notice. Rather, Jonathan was so severely harassed during his school days that teachers frequently discovered him sobbing by himself. He used to relax by humming lengthy tunes. Later, his mother Julie revealed that he would silently write whole songs in his mind when he was at his lowest. By the time he was 8 years old, he was exhibiting symptoms of sadness, but his brain was doing something remarkable. After hearing an opera once, he could recall every detail. Later, medical professionals would diagnose him with a type of musical savant syndrome, something that affects less than 1 person out of every 1,000. Even early, he struggled with weight. Food became his only source of solace when he was only 4 years old. He was already 40 pounds overweight by the age of 5. He weighed 95 pounds by the time he was 6, which was more than double the typical weight for his age. During lunch, children called him derogatory names and tossed food at him. And he resorted to eating more for solace the more they made fun of him. Jonathan weighed 154 pounds when he was 10 years old. His mom did everything she could. To pay for therapy, she even took out 2 mortgages on their home. However, nothing appeared to be effective. He would subsequently be diagnosed by experts with trauma-induced hyperphagia, a disorder that causes excessive weight gain and affects only around 2% of bullied children. Nobody was prepared for the moment his voice was heard. At the age of 10, a regular choir audition was being held by Mrs. Williams, a replacement music teacher. Jonathan made an effort to blend in with the other children, but as soon as he opened his mouth, everyone heard an unreal sound. He sounded like an adult tenor, both in tone and strength. It sounded like Pavarotti trapped in a child's body, Mrs. Williams later remarked. According to an examination of that initial tape, Jonathan's voice could reach a frequency range that is significantly higher than what most kids can handle. The fact that he had natural vibrato, something that typically takes singers 20 years to master, was even more unexpected. In a few weeks, he was performing adult-oriented solos. A microphone wasn't necessary for him. His voice could fill a 2,000-seat hall because it was tested at 95 dB. Later, that incident was referred to as one of the most significant findings in British music education. Jonathan participated in the Stratford and East London Music Festival at the age of 15. He was slightly taller than 5 feet and weighed 298 pounds. He faced 47 other vocalists, many of whom had years of professional training. Victoria Sterling, 17, who had previously performed at the Royal Opera House, was his fiercest opponent. Nessun Dorma was the song Jonathan chose to sing. By the time he was done, about 2,000 individuals had crammed themselves into a 1,200-person capacity. He received a standing ovation from the audience that lasted for over 4 minutes. He received the best score in the festival's history, 98 out of 100, from one of the judges, Sir David Wilcox. He received a recording opportunity in addition to a £2,500 award. More than that, though, he experienced what it was like to be applauded rather than jeered for the first time. He was admitted into the junior program at the Royal Academy of Music that same year. It was an uncommon occasion. There were only 23 selected from over 2,800 applicants. Despite having puked twice before the audition because he was nervous, Jonathan's performance was almost flawless. His voice sounded like it belonged to a 25-year-old with training, according to his academy teacher. After his mother demonstrated how difficult their financial situation was, the school, which typically costs more than £8,000 annually, dropped the price. Training took over Jonathan's weekends. 2 hours of performance coaching, 4 hours of theory, and 6 hours of singing technique are all included. Because of his appearance, the other pupils first ignored him. However, he became the youngest individual in the Academy's lengthy history to be cast in the lead role of the Magic Flute 3 months later. When Jenny Ewington, Jonathan's high school music instructor, took a risk in 2011, everything started to shift. The 17-year-old Jonathan she coupled with still weighed more than 20 stone. With Charlotte Gayakanelli, a 16-year-old, Jonathan lacked Charlotte's confidence. She enjoyed being in the spotlight and had been acting since she was 8 years old. Jenny wasn't making a guess. She chose Charlotte because she was confident that her commanding stage presence would counterbalance Jonathan's quiet but commanding voice. In front of only 15 classmates, they sang their debut duet, The Prayer. Jenny, however, felt she had discovered something unique even in that tiny space. Charlotte and Jonathan couldn't have been more different. He spent hours every day practicing opera while avoiding people. By the age of 16, she had been in more than 30 musicals and enjoyed every moment of being on stage. However, their voices harmonized in a way that seemed uncommon when they sang together. Jonathan's voice had a tenor range of C3 to C5. From C4 to C6, Charlotte's soprano voice changed. According to a music producer who listened to their early recordings, the vocal match is unique and only occurs once every generation. However, things weren't always easy behind the scenes. Jonathan needed continual prodding from Charlotte. Before rehearsals, he would occasionally have panic attacks and hide in the school restroom. She would locate him, soothe him, and entice him to return to the music room. They began playing at local gatherings to gain confidence. They performed at 23 locations between February and April 2012, including churches, retirement communities, weddings, and even bars. They received £50 apiece for their first paid work, which was an Easter service at a nearby church. After that, there was a significant event at the Epping Forest Country Club, where they gave a charity dinner performance for 200 guests. After the 5-minute standing ovation, talent scouts came over right away. By April, they were making £300 a show and 40 additional places were lining up to hire them. The Prayer remained as the center of each performance, even though their song list had expanded to 15 songs. Jonathan was more prepared for what was to happen thanks to these little performances. Charlotte was the one who insisted that they try out for Britain's Got Talent. When she first learned about the tryouts in March 2012, Jonathan initially turned her down. He didn't want to appear on national television and have his appearance ridiculed. Charlotte persevered. She persisted in her questioning for 3 weeks. She even promised that if he didn't agree, she would try out by herself. She filed their application barely 13 minutes before the deadline. Her bedroom was used to record the video. Jonathan appeared frightened and seldom appeared on film. Charlotte told the producers that it was either both or neither when they contacted, even though they were only interested in her. The London Palladium planned to host the audition on April 28. Jonathan had never even traveled alone on public transit. To ensure he wouldn't back out, Charlotte spent the previous evening at his place. Jonathan Antoine had no idea that his life would alter forever when he took the stage at Britain's Got Talent in 2012. He was just 17. He had disheveled hair, wore a plain t-shirt, and didn't resemble the entertainers that typically win over the judges. Millions would be stunned by what transpired next, though. Simon Cowell turned to fellow judge Carmen Electra and said something nasty before Jonathan had even finished singing. Declared right when you believed things couldn't get any worse. That remark was captured on video. It was cruel, and that was solely based on Jonathan's appearance. Jonathan, however, anticipated it. "I don't look like a standard performer," he subsequently remarked. "I simply went out there dressed normally. It turned into one of the most memorable pre-show scenes in BGT history. The song The Prayer followed. It was a strong duet that Celine Dion and Andrea Bocelli made well known. It was not Jonathan's choice. He and his singing companion Charlotte Giaconelli were invited to perform it at Jeanette Brown's wedding by his music instructor. The whole atmosphere shifted as Jonathan started singing. The audience stood up in a matter of seconds. People were in tears. Simon Cowell's mouth fell open. They received yes votes from all 4 judges. It was more than just an excellent performance. It was revolutionary. Simon's subsequent response stunned everyone even more. Jonathan was being compared to Luciano Pavarotti by the same man who had made fun of him just moments earlier. "You're a future star," he said. Experts supported him. Even at his age, Jonathan's voice was already displaying vocal maturity. He possessed the range and control of a person twice his age, they added. The performance went viral very fast. On March 24, 2012, the audition video was posted online. It received over 2.6 million views in a few weeks. It quickly rose to the top of the global TV audition viewership rankings. It was covered by international media. People started drawing comparisons between Susan Boyle and Jonathan. Pastor Vadi Bauscham and other religious leaders shared the video and praised it as a fantastic tale. Overnight, Jonathan transformed from a bullied adolescent to a global celebrity. However, the trip was not at all simple. Jonathan had a difficult past. He weighed 280 pounds and had endured years of bullying. He once became a recluse after having a nervous breakdown in school. Tracy, his mother, claimed that he would never leave the house and would hide under a large sweater. Thus, it was more than simply a show when he took the stage at BGT. It was a triumph. The pressure continued after that. Jonathan had to suppress his nervousness in order to remain composed during the semifinals. Charlotte was also in a panic. Jonathan, however, had mastered breathing techniques to manage his anxiety. To balance himself before singing, he had to sit down. The audience was once again won over by their rendition of Caruso. Even Simon Cowell said at that time that they were his favorite act of the entire performance. Nevertheless, debate erupted once more. Everyone was taken aback when Simon advised Jonathan to leave Charlotte and go it alone. Jonathan made no hesitation at all. He declined. "We've arrived here as a team and we intend to remain here as a team," he stated. He gained even more respect after that incident. They were predicted to win the final, but the outcome dashed their expectations. With 39% of the public vote, Ashley Butler and her dog, Pudsey, won first place. With 25.8%, Jonathan and Charlotte came in second. It was quite unexpected. Their admirers were devastated. Many believed that popularity now mattered more than talent. Simon Cowell wasted no time. He signed Jonathan and Charlotte to a record-breaking £1 million contract the day after the finals. That September saw the publication of their debut album, Together, which peaked at number 10 on the UK albums chart. Simon meticulously scheduled the release to coincide with the live performances of The X Factor. He was aware that they needed to attack while their performance was still fresh in his mind. Jonathan gasped. He remarked, "I'm still in shock that we are actually producing our own CDs." Their hit songs such as The Prayer and Caruso were included on the CDs. More than 250,000 copies were sold. Their CD would be amazing, Simon said. It was too. Perhaps Love, their second album, was released a year later. On October 14th, 2013, it was released. It peaked at number 5 on the UK chart, just like their first. However, something had changed. The album featured more contemporary renditions in addition to classical tunes. That change exposed a more serious issue. Charlotte and Jonathan had different desires. Opera drew Jonathan in, somber classical music. Charlotte had a preference for more contemporary forms, including musical theater. Their disparities became too great to overlook. Jonathan had spent years studying classical music. In 2010, he also won Young Musician of the Year at a local festival. On the other hand, Charlotte had experience in theater. Although they struggled behind the scenes, their second record was a success. They declared they would part ways in the beginning of 2014. Both of them made an effort to remain upbeat. In their joint statement, they expressed their excitement about returning to the recording studio. However, insiders disclosed that months of disagreements over song selections and creative direction led to the breakup. Jonathan had also suffered because of touring. His condition was already precarious. He had always had issues with his confidence and weight. According to his mother, he refused to go outside prior to BGT. Following the performance, he was pushed to the limit by the demands of appearances, concerts, and media interviews. Jonathan began experiencing panic attacks. Jonathan and Charlotte remained a team for 2 years. More than 250,000 albums were sold by them. Together, their debut album peaked at number 5 in the UK charts. However, fans were taken aback in February 2014. There was an internet post. They were parting ways. Behind the scenes, Sony had made them an unprecedented offer, simultaneous solo contracts for both. An offer like that hardly ever occurs. Jonathan's CD would be released in October and Charlotte's in June. The unified statement attempted to mitigate the impact. They had a remarkable journey together after meeting in high school in 2006. However, it was evident that they were traveling quickly and in opposite directions. The meeting with Sony to prepare their third album was the true turning moment. They couldn't agree on anything, according to Charlotte afterward. Not the vision, not the music, nor the mood. Jonathan desired to learn more about classical opera. Charlotte had a preference for musical theater. There was a real split. Sony decided to go it alone. They had made up their minds a month later. Charlotte didn't take her time. Her debut solo album, Solitaire, was released in July 2014. Additionally, she had already made her stage debut at London's Landor Theatre by February 2015. She played the lead role of Amalia Balash in the Broadway classic She Loves Me. From February 4 to March 7, the show was on. This was more than just a job decision for her. It was a change. Night after night, she was performing live on stage, doing what she loved. Jonathan had a quite different experience. He did not leap confidently in. He was terrified. He wasn't sure if he could handle it alone at the age of 19. The one with stage presence had always been Charlotte. She gave him courage. He had to discover it on his own now. They had achieved enormous success. More than 200,000 albums have been sold globally. On the Billboard classical crossover charts among the top 10, the expectations were depressing. He took a long step back. He practiced. He recovered. He made an effort to recall his original motivation for loving music. The split wasn't warmly received by fans. The headlines were brutal. She dumps him after reading it. It was painful. As a couple, they had captured the hearts of many. They had no intention of letting go. The solo transactions were endorsed by certain industry insiders. Others were concerned that it was premature. In October 2013, their second album, Perhaps Love, has recently been released in the United States. It didn't feel like the end. It felt like the beginning. Jonathan wasn't done, though. His album, Tenor, which had 12 classical compositions serious opera, peaked at number 1 on the official classical artist album chart in October 2014. He was the youngest tenor to ever reach the top of that list at the age of 19. The album's ascent to number 13 on the UK pop chart was even more unexpected. It was a breakthrough. He was controlling, not just getting by on his own. There was one particular instance that year. One of the finest tenors in history, Placido Domingo, asked Jonathan to be his special guest at the London iTunes Festival. It served as both a sign that Jonathan had come and a moment of respect. By 2020, Jonathan embarked on his most ambitious endeavor to date. A concept album, June 5th, marked the publication of Going the Distance. This 3-year project, which was produced by Grammy winner Greg Field, involved the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. This album wasn't your typical one. It was based on Jonathan's own travels and was told in 3 acts. He performed the aria that made Pavarotti famous, Nessun Dorma, for the first time. Finally, on March 15th, a concert special, including a full orchestra and choir, was shown by PBS. At the age of 25, Jonathan had become into the performer that people had previously only dreamed he could be. He then shocked everyone once more in 2024. This time, the Diane Warren Songbook Vol. 1, which has 8 tracks and is only 33 minutes long, is requested. A partnership with Diane Warren, one of the most well-known figures in pop music. In addition to Jonathan, she has written for Lady Gaga, Aerosmith, and Celine Dion. Jonathan Antoine was only 17 years old in 2012 when he appeared on the stage of Britain's Got Talent. No one anticipated what happened next. Shy, overweight, and trembling with anxiety. The world was astounded by his voice. He soared, not simply sang. His life was revolutionized by that one performance. However, the audience was never privy to the profound bewilderment and hidden struggles he had endured for years. Furthermore, it would be over 10 years before the truth was revealed. Jonathan revealed something he had never previously disclosed to the public in an interview conducted in Australia at the beginning of 2023. An autism diagnosis had been made for him. In late 2022, just after turning 27, he received the news. It seemed like a daydream to him. It came as a shock to those closest to him. Nobody had anticipated it, not even as he was performing all over the world or throughout his ascent to fame or following 5 successful albums. However, the diagnosis clarified everything. All of a sudden, there was a reason for years of mental anguish, social anxiety, and perplexity. It was not a justification. Clarity was the key. In honor of World Autism Awareness Day that year, he sent a statement on Instagram. He wrote on how his self-perception was altered by the diagnosis. Although he acknowledged that it was frightening, he also described it as freeing. Jonathan had been dealing with incomprehensible difficulties for 28 years. He battled feelings that seemed excessively large. After the interviews, he felt exhausted. He struggled with ongoing criticism and pressure, particularly following his unexpected rise to stardom. He had been living in silence with undiagnosed autism while all of this was going on. His public admission sparked an instantaneous and powerful response. His voice faltered as he acknowledged that this was the first time he had discussed it in public during that same interview. He clarified that it was a relief to have an explanation for all those trying times. Life had felt much more difficult because of the prolonged ignorance. He was straightforward in his statement. He felt as though he had been in the dark for 28 years. The pain has always been there, behind the spotlight. Since he was 4 years old, Jonathan had been teased because of his weight. The scrutiny only increased after BGT. Not only did the fame arrive quickly, but so did the criticism. He frequently felt misinterpreted. In retrospect, he sees that a lot of his difficulties were indicators of something more serious. Furthermore, the fact that no one discovered it earlier demonstrates how autism can go undetected in creative or talented individuals. However, Jonathan chose to speak up, not only for himself, but also for others, instead of becoming mired in regret. He started promoting neurodiversity and mental wellness utilizing his position. He became a supporter of research on juvenile brain tumors and participated in campaigns like Make Some Noise by Classic FM. He publicly discussed how autism impacts day-to-day living on social media. He posted more than simply catchphrases. He described the sensation. Like he had done for 28 years, he wanted to help those who might be suffering in silence. His remarks were significant because his voice was heard by millions, but that was only the beginning of his personal adventure. When he was transforming his body at the same time he was accepting his autism diagnosis. Throughout his life, Jonathan had battled with his weight. He weighed around 280 pounds when he first went on BGT, but he drastically changed his weight in the years that followed. He joined Weight Watchers in 2013 and in just 4 months shed over 50 pounds. He eventually shed 5 stone, or 70 pounds, and managed to keep it off. Fans occasionally failed to identify him in pictures due to the extreme change, but it was more than simply looks. It was about feeling more in control and healthy. He had previously battled weight loss in large part because of an unidentified thyroid ailment. Everything changed after the physicians discovered it. For the first time, he realized why it had always been so hard to lose weight. He leveraged the boost he received from managing the thyroid condition. He established a daily ritual that became revered. He made a commitment to walk 10,000 steps every day beginning on January 12. He has only missed 2 days since. He adhered to it regardless of his location or the task at hand. To reach his objective, he would even pace in one place. He saw walking as more than just physical activity. It was his method of taking control of his life. Calories were burnt. It helped him to relax. It also provided him with structure. It was the only thing that gave him a sense of control on some days. I feel healthier and stronger than I have in 10 years, he added later. This indicates that he hasn't felt this well since the beginning of his career. He still has more objectives to accomplish, but he is doing so with greater vigor, clarity, and serenity now. Regaining his health aided in his mental recovery as well. Numbers on a scale weren't the only thing involved. After feeling stuck for years, it was time to fight back. Jonathan unexpectedly found love in the midst of everything. He used a web chat service to meet Canadian waitress Michelle Dowsett. He was feeling adrift when they first started dating. He was attempting to discover his identity as a solo musician after splitting with Charlotte Giaconelli, his longtime duet partner. Michelle provided him with support and stability. She helped him regain his confidence and became his muse. I publicly referred to her as the light of his life, and she even served as the inspiration for his song Belief. Michelle frequently went from Canada to help Jonathan, despite the fact that they lived in different nations. In 2016, they made their romance public by attending Florence Foster Jenkins's film premiere together. Michelle wasn't merely a supporting character. She actively participated in Jonathan's artistic endeavors. He claimed that she fully comprehended him. As he navigated the emotional burden of his autism diagnosis and the responsibilities of his work, that support became even more invaluable. His relationship with Charlotte, however, waned. Fans frequently questioned whether they still communicate, but Jonathan stated in a 2017 interview that they hardly ever do. He clarified that there is no time for long-standing friendships when one is constantly working. After meeting with Sony, they were unable to come to an agreement on tracks for a third album, which led to their breakup. The label eventually recommended working on solo projects. They took a month to make the emotionally charged decision. However, there was no turning back once they did. Jonathan is currently getting ready to shoot his entire tale. There are plans to make a documentary about his life. David J. Baird is in charge of the project, which may be titled Beyond the High Sea, and is scheduled to start production in 2023 or 2024. It will examine the severe bullying Jonathan experienced as a youngster and trace his path from loneliness to widespread recognition. The movie promises to show the public things they have never seen before, such as early career footage and details about his current diagnosis. It might be Jonathan's most comprehensive portrait ever created. Despite all of his personal struggles, Jonathan has established a remarkable profession. His current estimated net worth is $4 million. More than 64 million people have viewed his YouTube account. About $190,000 has been made in ad income from that alone. On Spotify, his music streams consistently draw over 50,000 monthly listeners. Both Believe and Tinare, his solo albums, peaked at #1 on the UK classical charts, and he never lost sight of his classical roots throughout it all. He didn't exchange his art for immediate notoriety. He was loyal to himself.